Well, to Canada now, where the Trudeau government is pushing the LGBTQ plus LTY agenda in the nation's school system. If you're enrolling your children right now in preschool or kindergarten, you'll be told, hey, they won't be addressed as he or she. That's something the school systems are doing. Parents are being notified of this. They won't be given them biological pronouns. The kids will instead need to eventually decide what they will be called, despite what the parents want. Yes, this is happening in Canada. The most vocal critics of Trudeau's policies in Canada are coming largely from the Muslim population, telling Trudeau to keep your ideology away from our children. Protests have been erupting across Canada, and now Muslim activists are joining together with Christians in order to stage a 1 million-person march across Canada in September, calling on people of all faiths to come out and denounce this gender ideology in schools. David Creighton has been writing about this at the Post Millennial and joins us now. And David, you just had a really fascinating interview with the organizer of this 1 million-person march. This is Kamel El-Sheikh, who's organizing this, trying to bring together all faiths to march on the Trudeau government and say enough is enough. What did you find?
Well, I was fascinated because I looked up Kamel El-Sheikh after I discovered he was the motivator, the chief motivator behind all of these protests that we've been experiencing here in Ottawa. And they've been massive protests. And he has been coordinating with other Muslims across Canada, primarily in Calgary and in the Maritimes. So when he told me about this 1 million-person march, I first thought, well, you know, that's optimistic because a lot of people talk about these 1 million-man or 1 million-person marches. But when he told me the network he has created, that this isn't just going to be Ottawa, it's going to be from coast to coast, I think this is a realizable objective. And, you know, the question I first asked when Muslims started taking to the streets and literally had children were stomping on the gay pride flag, I said, this is a real conundrum for the Trudeau government and for Justin Trudeau, because he always talks about Islamophobia. And he talks about transphobia. So which phobia is going to trump the other? Clearly, homophobia is trumping Islamophobia, and transphobia is trumping Islamophobia. But that's what happens when you have a country that is no longer subject just to the rule of law, but to identity politics.
So in your interview with El-Sheikh, he was specifically talking about this agenda being foisted on children. And I think he even shared photographs with you showing some of these school pamphlets that are being handed out to children. Can you talk about that? What does it say?
Yeah, that's the first time I think we've publicly released some of this literature. And he sent me these screenshots that he had taken of the pamphlets that are being given to Muslim children. So it not only proves that the education system is targeting Muslim children, it shows that they're trying to demonstrate, which whatever means possible, that there's somehow a correlation between being a Muslim and being a member of the LGBT community. And clearly there is a contradiction there with the Quran, as there is with the Bible. And the Muslims are saying that stop pretending that this should all be self-evident to children, and stop indoctrinating our children into ideas and theology, really. This is ideology and theology that is contrary to basic Muslim beliefs. And I think it's interesting that the Muslims have finally had enough of this. And in this country, we've not seen the pushback from evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics over this. But I think the movement that Camille has begun here is going to bring a religious unity to Canada that we've never seen before. It's going to unite Protestants, evangelicals, Roman Catholics, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, all of which are beginning to say there's something wrong with children being forced to be indoctrinated into this ideology. And I think this is where this is going. I think it's going to be a beautiful outcome of unity amongst all faiths and races.
I would love that. I absolutely hope that Canada leads the charge on this. That would be amazing. One of the things that El Sheikh told you in your interview, he talked about the school system, and he was curious of why the Trudeau government is so obsessed with teaching sexuality to children and basically lying to these children and not even focusing on education. They're more concerned with sort of handing out these sexualized pamphlets to children. Even handing out one pamphlet says, "Can I still be a Muslim if I'm queer?" And we've seen some of the horrible books that are being also put inside of Canadian schools as well with the imagery, and it's shocking stuff.
Well, if this was a heterosexual movement pushing pornography in the schools, it would never have gotten off the ground. But somehow this is allowable if it's all under the banner of the LGBTQ plus movement. And some of the material that children are being exposed to is just so vile. And yet we don't seem to be able to teach children how to read or write or add. And the school system in Canada is as bad as I read about the school system in the United States, because they're so obsessed with teaching children how to masturbate and how to view sexually explicit materials that they've forgotten what the purpose of education is. And this is a tragedy. And it's a tragedy foremost for the children in Canada who are being denied a proper and basic education and being exposed to things that at one time you couldn't find on the street, but they're being digested in the classroom. And this really is a travesty. And thank God there's enough concerned parents out there who say we need to save our children and save their minds from this indoctrination.
What has El Sheikh? What has been his conversations with the Trudeau administration? Is the Trudeau administration concerned that they're going to see this 1 million person march across Canada, denouncing their gender ideology pushing in schools?
They should be concerned, because there's a poll released last week, and I included this in my post-millennial article, that there's now a plurality of immigrants, of Canadians who were not born in this country, that are voting conservative. It's like 48% versus 38% that are voting liberal. Now, this is a complete transformation of the political process in Canada, where the liberals, like the Democrats in the United States, always assumed if they brought in enough immigrants, they would get their votes. Not happening anymore. It's the immigrants, the new immigrants in Canada, who are saying, we came to Canada to get away from indoctrination, to get away from thought control, to get away from censorship. All of these things the Trudeau government is pushing on this country. So it's the new immigrants who are pushing back the hardest. So I think Trudeau has a lot to be worried about. And if this 1 million person march comes off, as I believe it will, I think that might be a wake-up call. But he cannot change. He cannot change his ideology because he is too much invested in it, and he will go down with that ship.
One of the big issues, of course, that they're fighting against is this idea that children could change their gender without telling their parents. Well, you can never change your gender, of course, but that they could go and receive some sort of surgery without telling their parents, or simply change their pronouns without telling their parents. And of course, Christian leaders and Muslim leaders in Canada are opposed to this. But the Muslim side of this has been much more outspoken. Have you been surprised? Maybe on the Christian side of this, you're starting to hear more and more vocal leadership speaking out against this, are you not?
We're beginning to, but it's taken far too long. Because if you consider the fact that 12-year-olds in this country, and any country that I'm aware of, they don't vote, they can't own firearms, they can't drink, they can't do a lot of things that adults can do. But however, they can decide to change their gender and literally change their sex. And this is absolutely outrageous. They can be chemically castrated without even telling their parents that this process is beginning. And this is outrageous. And if Christians aren't upset about this, if they haven't said, I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore, I don't know what's wrong with them, because it's time for parents to say, we're losing a generation of children to a liberal ideology that is toxic and that is literally destroying children's lives. You can't make decisions on your gender at 12 years old because it's so consequential. It is so long-term. And it's devastating. And we should not be allowing this to happen, at least without parental consent or knowledge. And this is the nanny state gone mad. We have Trudeau saying the state has a right to make these decisions on behalf of your children. The children don't need to talk to their parents, because as long as the teachers are aware of it, it's okay.
Unbelievable. It's really, it's stunning. It's like a world I don't even recognize anymore. My father passed away at 86 years old just a few short years ago, and I think, my gosh, if he were alive today, he wouldn't even recognize this world. You know, it's really, really stunning. So good for. Go ahead.
I say the same thing all the time. It's not the world or the country that I was even born in, and so much has changed so radically over the last three decades. It's alarming. But Canada is also the home of assisted suicide. So on the one hand, we're killing people because they're depressed. We're killing people because they just want to die, but we're destroying the younger generation at the same time. And it is a sad story, but the hopeful thing is that people are fighting back. And if it took the Muslims, and you know what's interesting is the left is adopting the same talking points that the far right used to use against the Muslims. They're saying every Muslim is a terrorist. Every Muslim wants jihad. Every Muslim wants Sharia law. They're using the same toxic talking points that were once reserved for the far right. It just goes to show you how desperate they are, is that they will use this kind of hateful language. And by the way, Camille was banished from Twitter the night after we did that interview. Now, is this a coincidence? I don't think so, because the response was phenomenal. And he has been targeted by the LGBTQ mafia in this country. There are literally dozens of people who were checking his Twitter account to find one tweet that could have been construed as hateful, because they want him silenced. And they're after other Muslims as well. I'm interviewing a Muslim woman who has a PhD. She's a civil engineer, and her job is in danger because she's being attacked on Twitter as a hateful Muslim every day. And this is how desperate the left is.
Well, we hope that this rally, this million person march to protest against gender ideology and Pride Month in schools can take hold. That's going to happen on September 20th. As Canadians from all faiths from coast to coast come out on this. So we hope that this is a wake-up call in Canada, and hopefully something will change. David Clayton has been following this and doing a great job as always. David, great to see you. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.